Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're cutting through some of the noise to explore a topic that really it touches virtually everyone on Earth. It shapes economies, it redefines cultures, and, well, it often sparks some pretty intense debate. We're talking about human migration.
Mm.
It's a truly global subject, and our mission today is basically to help you navigate its complexities, maybe uncover some surprising facts, and, just enrich your understanding. And as we dig into the insights from our sources, we'll also be sharpening our grasp of some key vocabulary around this.
Yeah, that's useful.
We're going to unpack the fundamental reasons why people move. We'll challenge some widely held misconceptions, those ideas that often cloud the conversation. And then we'll explore practical, humane solutions from around the globe that are actually working, or at least showing promise.
Right.
Our sources today are, well, they're rich and incredibly varied. We're drawing from international experts, big organizations like the IOM, the International Organization for Migration, and detailed case studies that really paint a vivid picture of global mobility, showing patterns and possibilities.
That's right. And I think it's crucial to start by recognizing that, human migration, it's as old as humanity itself. For millennia, people have moved, searching for better lives, fleeing conflict, finding new opportunities. It's just part of our shared history. It's natural. Yet today, it often gets framed as a problem to be solved, sometimes with a really negative spin.
Yeah, you hear that a lot.
But our sources, they consistently highlight something much more profound, which is that well-managed migration is actually a powerful driver of sustainable development. It brings significant benefits. Think about new skills, strengthening the labor force, attracting investment, enriching cultural diversity.
Right.
It fundamentally shifts the narrative, doesn't it? From seeing it as just a challenge to seeing it as a potential asset, an undeniable asset, often.
That's a great way to frame it. And to help us navigate this deep dive, we'll be focusing on some key terms. You'll hear these pop up throughout the discussion from the experts, so keep an ear out for them. Maybe think about how you might use them in your own conversations. First, obviously, migration itself, just the movement of people from one place to another.
The core concept.
Exactly. Then we'll differentiate between a refugee, that's someone forced to flee their country due to persecution, war, violence.
A very specific legal status.
Right. And an asylum seeker. This is someone seeking international protection, but their claim for refugee status hasn't actually been decided yet.
Still in process.
We'll also touch on diaspora, communities of people dispersed from their homeland, but who still maintain ties.
Like a network.
Yeah.
Right.
And a catalyst, basically a driving force, something that sparks change or movement.
Yeah.
Then we'll look closely at the comprehensive ranking system. It's a specific points-based immigration model we'll unpack later. And other important terms we'll define as we go are persecution, displacement, labor shortage, and predictability.
Okay.
These words will just help us get a better handle on the nuances here. All right, so let's unpack this. It's fascinating but really complex, this topic of migration. When we talk about why people move, it's way more nuanced than just, wanting a change of scenery or a single reason.
Oh, absolutely.
Our sources highlight a whole range of reasons, and they often intertwine in these really profound human stories.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And we can kind of categorize them into several key drivers.
Yeah.
Each one tells a human story, really. These are the forces, sometimes subtle, sometimes really stark, that compel people, families, to embark on these huge journeys, sometimes across continents, all in search of a new reality. And understanding these drivers, well, that's the first step to really grasping the, multifaceted nature of global mobility.
Okay, so where do we start? Maybe the classic reason. Economics. The search for a better livelihood. That's probably the one most people think of first.
Definitely.
Our sources point out that migration is often fundamentally driven by labor demand. And this isn't just about individual ambition, right? It's about a global economic reality where skills and opportunities, they don't always line up neatly within borders.
That's absolutely right. And just to put some numbers on this, one source, the World Economic Forum, highlighted a pretty staggering statistic. There are 30 million vacant jobs across just the world's 30 largest economies.
30 million?
Yeah. And this isn't just a small gap, right? It translates into a massive $1.3 trillion annual loss for businesses. Just because roles aren't filled, demand isn't met.
Trillion. That's huge.
It's a colossal global labor shortage. And migration is uniquely positioned to address it. So it's not just that people want jobs. It's that countries desperately need specific skills, specific workers to keep their economies going and avoid these huge financial losses. The demand is there. It's pulling people.
So it's like a symbiotic relationship almost. Individuals seeking opportunities and countries needing skills and workers.
Exactly.
It's about linking talent with opportunities wherever they might be. Our sources really emphasize that for centuries, migration's been this major driver of development, of prosperity, and this economic exchange is a primary, powerful example of that.
And this need, this demand for workers, it's only projected to get, well, more acute. The sources detail this really striking demographic imbalance. You've got aging populations in countries like Japan, South Korea, Italy, Spain, Greece, Portugal. They're projected to have nearly 40% of their populations over 65 by 2050.
40%. Imagine the strain on the workforce.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Supporting such a large elderly population with a shrinking workforce. Huge economic strain. But then, at the same time, you look at developing countries, particularly in Africa. They have the largest youth generations in history. 70% of the population under 30, 40% under 14. But often there's real scarcity of jobs within their own borders.
So you have this huge pool of young potential workers.
Right. And this demographic mismatch, it creates an urgent economic imperative for migration. It acts like a vital bridge, connecting that youthful energy and available skills with the labor markets of aging nations.
It really sounds like a win-win scenario if it's managed well.
If it's managed well, yes.
Yeah.
It's waiting to be fully harnessed.
Okay, so economics is huge. What else drives people? Education comes up too, right? Sometimes maybe overshadowed by the bigger headlines, but pursuing education seems like another clear reason.
Yeah.
People moving across borders for better learning opportunities for themselves or their kids. It's an investment.
Absolutely. It's a direct path to personal growth, to future prosperity. Think about it. Individuals seeking quality education, they elevate their own prospects. And then in turn, they can become invaluable assets, contributing to the human capital of both their origin and destination countries. Lots of universities globally, they actively recruit international students, not just for tuition fees, though that's part of it, but they recognize them as a vital pipeline for future talent. These students often bridge skills gaps. They foster global exchange, scientific, cultural, and sometimes they return home with enhanced skills. It contributes to what some call brain circulation, not just a brain drain.
That's a much more positive way to think about it than brain drain.
Right. It's about building skills and knowledge that can potentially benefit everyone involved.
Okay, now, here's where it gets, as you said, really serious. Sometimes heartbreaking. Many people think economics first, but our sources use this incredibly powerful language for the next driver. Echoes of gunfire, specters of war.
Yeah.
This isn't about choice for many people, is it? It's about survival.
This is often the rawest, most urgent catalyst for displacement. That's the phrase used. We're talking about millions of people forced to flee active crises, intense violence, instability. Places like Sudan, the DRC, Myanmar come up in the sources. These individuals are refugees. They're running for their lives. Their journeys are driven by this desperate search for asylum, which is, at its core, the legal quest for the most basic human right, safety.
Yeah.
They are fleeing persecution, active threats to their very existence.
Yeah.
For them, the decision to leave, it's not optional. It really is life or death.
And that distinction is so crucial, isn't it? These aren't economic migrants choosing opportunity. These are people seeking survival, seeking protection from persecution.
Exactly.
The invisible nation source, it really highlights that for them, the journey starts not as a choice, but as this inescapable flight from violent conflict, often leaving everything behind.
Exactly. While economic migration is about seeking opportunity, this type of movement is fundamentally about survival, period.
Yeah.
It's about escaping unimaginable horrors, seeking the basic right to live without fear. The sources make it really clear. The trauma of what they've left, the profound uncertainty of the road ahead that defines their reality. It's a human tragedy on a vast scale. We have to acknowledge that.
Absolutely. Now, there's another force, maybe quieter, but just as relentless, shaping movement. Climate change. Our sources describe it powerfully. An unforgiving Earth, an active agent of displacement. This feels like it's becoming increasingly urgent.
You're absolutely right. It is. Droughts, devastating floods, rising seas. They are now forcing entire communities to move, often permanently.
Yeah.
Imagine families in, say, Central America's dry corridor. Their farms just can't sustain them anymore.
Right.
Or communities on low-lying Pacific islands where the ocean is literally reclaiming ancestral lands, homes becoming unlivable.
Wow.
One source even noted a stark statistic. Climate change is now causing more new displacements each year than violent conflict.
More than conflict. That's incredible.
It is. These aren't just isolated incidents anymore. They're systemic, large-scale shifts. They're profoundly altering where people can survive, where they can thrive.
And this highlights that emerging category, doesn't it? Climate refugees, even if their legal status is kind of a gray area in international law right now.
The legal framework hasn't quite caught up.
But their reality is stark. They have little choice but to move. Often internally first, maybe, but then sometimes across borders. It's a tangible, urgent reason for migration. Definitely needs new policy thinking.
Absolutely. And finally, we can't overlook the deeply personal reasons, the fundamental human desire to reunite with family members who've already migrated. That's a powerful motivator for many.
Sure. Family ties.
And then there's broader political instability. Even if it's not outright violent conflict, things like crumbling infrastructure, widespread corruption, a lack of basic services, they can make daily life unsustainable and act as a strong catalyst for movement. So you put all these diverse factors together: economic pull, educational draw, flight from danger, climate pressures, family ties, political instability.
Yeah.
It creates this really complex tapestry of why people move, driven by both desperation, sometimes, and hope, other times. It just underscores that migration isn't one single thing. It's multifaceted.
Okay, so given that complex reality of why people move, what does this mean for the stories we often hear, the public narratives? It means we really need to challenge some widely held beliefs, doesn't it?
Urgently.
Our sources did a fantastic job debunking some common myths that frankly just obscure the conversation. They hinder productive discussion, humane policies. They often fuel fear.
Critical thinking is it's essential here, especially on a topic as charged as migration. So let's tackle some of these pervasive myths head on using the expert insights from our sources. It's so important to separate perception from fact.
Okay, myth number one, this one's huge. People migrate because they are poor.
Yeah, the destitution narrative.
Right. They must be coming because they're impoverished, fleeing absolute poverty. Seems intuitive, maybe, but the sources tell a very different story. Quite surprising, actually.
Not true at all, according to Martin Plum. He's from the International Center for Migration Policy Development. In fact, migrating is incredibly expensive. Think about it. The costs. Transportation flights, buses, or, tragically, those exorbitant fees charged by smugglers for dangerous journeys.
Right, smugglers aren't cheap.
Not at all. Then there are visa applications, passports, sometimes even bribes, sadly, the poorest of the poor. They often cannot even dream of attempting a long, difficult journey to a new country, let alone getting the documents or transport sorted.
So they're trapped by poverty.
Often, yes. The sources cite data showing, for instance, 9% of Europeans emigrate, but only 2.6% of Africans do.
That's a big difference.
It is. And it's not because Africans don't want to move. It's often because these significant financial resources needed are just a massive barrier for the majority.
Wow, that completely flips the script on that common perception, doesn't it?
It really does.
It highlights that migration often requires some level of financial means or access to resources, not a total lack of them.
Exactly. Which implies that those truly trapped by extreme poverty often can't leave. That's a different but equally significant challenge.
Okay, myth number two, another really persistent one, causes a lot of anxiety. Migrants steal jobs.
Ah, yes, the job competition fear.
We hear it constantly. But Professor Heinde Haas, a leading expert, he clarifies the main driver is actually labor demand in the destination countries. Migrants often come to do jobs that are in short supply. They're not necessarily competing directly for existing jobs.
Right. They often fill critical gaps. They can even create new jobs through their own economic activity, starting businesses, consuming goods and services.
So they're filling a labor shortage rather than taking jobs from people already there. Can you give us a specific example from the sources, one that really illustrates how demand shapes the flow?
Absolutely. The Haas notes a fascinating example. Lots of people travel to France to work as au pairs. Why? Huge demand for childcare there. But you don't see the same flow of au pairs to the Netherlands.
Oh, interesting. Why not?
Well, partly because the Netherlands has a highly subsidized childcare system. This reduces the demand for private au pairs. So this illustrates precisely how this Specific demand for certain jobs in a country actively shapes where migrants choose to go. It's not random. It's a direct response to market needs, even if those needs are shaped by social policies.
That makes perfect sense. It's supply and demand, basically.
Fundamentally.
Okay, myth number 3. The images we see. Headlines often focus on these really perilous journeys across seas, borders, without authorization. Makes it seem like that's the norm.
Paints a picture of chaos.
Yeah.
But Professor DeHaas, again, he strongly emphasizes this is a significant distortion of the bigger picture. The overwhelming majority of migrants move within the law.
The overwhelming majority.
Yes. For instance, a striking statistic. 9 out of 10 Africans who come to Europe arrive with a passport and a valid visa.
9 out of 10,
Yeah.
that's completely different from the common perception.
Completely. The How to Solve Migration source clearly states most migratory movements are regular, meaning they happen legally, with proper documents, authorization. Irregular migration, entering, staying, working without authorization, it happens, yes, and often tragically. But it represents a much smaller slice of global movement than is often implied.
So those dramatic images, while real for some facing desperate situations.
They don't represent the broader, mostly lawful reality of migration.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, myth 4. It can feel, maybe from the news coverage, like the whole world is rushing towards just a few Western countries, Europe, UK, US, creating this immense pressure.
Yeah, the convergence idea.
But Raphael Schilhav from Oxfam offers a really crucial correction here. He points out that 90% of global migration is actually regional.
Regional, not long distance.
Mostly regional. People seeking refuge or opportunities in neighboring countries, not necessarily across continents.
Wow, 90%. That fundamentally changes the perspective, doesn't it?
Completely. Think about it. Many displaced by conflict in Sudan might move to Chad or South Sudan or other nearby African nations first.
Right. Not necessarily trying to get to Europe immediately.
Exactly. Or significant flows within Latin America or within Asia. This context is crucial. The narrative of everyone converging on a few wealthy nations, it just doesn't tell the full story.
That's a really important correcting.
And finally, myth 5. This one is maybe the most damaging. Migration is a threat.
The security narrative.
It's so pervasive, often used to fuel anti-immigrant sentiment, framing migration as inherently dangerous.
And Mark Ackerman, his research focuses on military and security industries. He highlights a disturbing reality. Certain sectors, specifically those military and security industries, they actually profit significantly from framing migration as a security problem.
They profit from the fear.
Essentially, yes. This framing influences policies, drives demand for border tech, surveillance, detention centers, creates a financial incentive to keep pushing the threat narrative.
That's quite cynical.
It is. But multiple sources across the board unequivocally stress the opposite. That well-managed migration, far from being a threat, is a powerful driver of sustainable development. It brings immense benefits, skills, investment, cultural diversity. It's presented not as a security issue to contain, but as a vital solution to big challenges like labor shortages, demographic shifts. It's an opportunity, not a danger.
So, debunking these myths is step 1. It's clear our understanding needs to be grounded in facts, not fear.
Absolutely.
So if these common perceptions are wrong, how do we move forward? How do we build better systems, more effective, more humane ones that actually benefit everyone involved? Migrants, host countries, origin countries.
That is the crucial question, isn't it? If current policies often fall short, what could an alternative look like? And our experts offered several really compelling ideas, practical examples of how to improve migration governance, moving from just reacting, often punitively, to being proactive and seeking mutual benefit.
Okay, like what? One idea that seems counterintuitive to some is creating more legal pathways. Seems odd if you want control, but the argument is it actually makes things safer and more orderly. Directly tackles that myth about irregular migration.
Absolutely. Oluwafemi Ebb, who investigates human trafficking, makes a very strong case here. He argues, if laws are clear, understandable, and visas are easily granted when criteria are met, guess what? Migrants will use those legal routes. They'd rather not patronize dangerous smugglers if there's a viable alternative.
Stands to reason.
It's not just theory, it's practical.
Yeah.
It reduces dangerous journeys, saves lives, prevents suffering, and it actively undermines the criminal trafficking businesses by drying up their customer base.
So it hits them where it hurts their profits.
Exactly. It's a pragmatic, almost market-based approach to a terrible problem.
So focus on opening viable legal pathways, not just restricting, makes sense. And given those global labor shortages we talked about, what about actively matching skills to needs? That seems logical.
Precisely. Livia Remigers, an expert on European labor markets, recommended the EU should invest seriously in research. First, identify the specific shortcomings in their labor markets.
Hmm.
Pinpoint exactly what skills are needed where.
Okay.
Then, simultaneously, research potential labor supply from countries, say, in Africa. Look for direct matches. This systematic approach allows for targeted migration that genuinely benefits both sides.
And if there isn't a perfect match?
Well, Martine Pluim added that global skills partnerships could bridge those gaps. Imagine like a European company helps fund specific skills training in an African country
Uh-huh.
with the guarantee of a visa and a job for graduates who succeed.
That sounds really innovative, like a direct pipeline.
Exactly. It makes migration a truly beneficial exchange, fostering development for everyone.
That's a powerful model. And once migrants are in a country legally, how can we help them contribute fully, avoid them getting stuck?
Good question. Kaneki Strick, she's a member of the European Parliament, she suggested Europeanizing the labor market. Basically, enhance migrants' right to move within the EU for work.
Oh, so they're not tied to just one country.
Currently, they often are, locked into the member state where they first got residency, even if a perfect job opens up elsewhere in the EU where their skills are desperately needed.
That seems inefficient.
Very. Allowing them mobility would boost their integration across Europe and help solve those regional labor mismatches much better, make the whole bloc more efficient.
Makes sense.
And Amanda Bysong pointed out the importance of visa grace periods.
Grace periods.
Yeah, allowing workers who lose a job a reasonable time to find a new one. Stops them falling into irregularity out of desperation.
Right, gives them breathing room.
Exactly. And Bremfraus from the Mixed Migration Center, he even shared ideas like visa deposits returned on timely departure or offering premium access to come back again. Incentives for following the rules, building trust.
Interesting ideas to encourage compliance. Now, Canada often comes up as a model for immigration policy. What makes their system stand out? Why is it seen as more objective?
Canada does offer a highly regarded model, yeah. They mainly use this sophisticated point system, the Comprehensive Ranking System, or CRS. It's specifically for economic migrants. And it's designed to be remarkably objective and transparent. Gives everyone, potential migrants, the Canadian public, a clear view of the criteria. Takes away some of the guesswork and subjectivity.
Okay, so how does this points system actually work? What does it prioritize?
Well, individuals can score up to 1,200 points online. Very accessible. The core 600 points are based on factors directly linked to potential economic contribution. Things like skills, work experience, and crucially, language proficiency, English and/or French, since Canada's bilingual.
Okay, core economic factors.
Right. And they also give points for a spouse or partner's education, recognizing the family unit. Then there's an additional 600 points. These are for specific attributes that help integration or meet specific needs, like having a confirmed job offer already,
Ah, that makes sense.
or having a sibling who's already a resident, or really strong French language skills, which they want to encourage.
So it's layered, core skills plus bonus factors.
Exactly. It allows a thorough, pretty fair evaluation of an applicant's potential.
And this sounds like it provides a lot of that word we mentioned earlier, predictability. For migrants who know what they need to aim for, and for the public who understand the system.
That's a key benefit the experts really stressed. Martine Pluim noted this predictability actually calms the public debate.
Calms the debate. How?
Because the criteria are clear, measurable, openly communicated. It builds trust in government policy. Victoria Essa, a Canadian expert, also said this transparent system gives Canadians a feeling of control over immigration.
That feeling of control seems important for public buy-in.
Vital. As Senator Ratna Omidvar pointed out, when the public feels the system is fair, controlled, and beneficial, support for migration is much higher. Creates a more welcoming environment.
That's a powerful lesson. Are other countries looking at Canada's model? Especially those facing similar challenges like aging populations.
Yes, definitely. Scotland, for example.
Yeah.
Facing an aging population, needing migrants to fill labor shortages, much like Canada has managed. They've shown real interest in Canada's rural migration schemes specifically.
Rural schemes.
Yeah, these are innovative programs that directly connect foreign workers with employers in smaller Canadian communities facing specific shortages. It's a very tailored approach, addressing precise local needs. Very practical.
Adaptable too, it sounds like.
Very.
Okay, shifting gears a bit. The source has also highlighted the huge challenges for asylum seekers, especially the strain on systems in places like Europe. There seems to be a real imbalance in how responsibility is shared.
There is, yes, a profound imbalance. The Dublin regulation in Europe, that's the EU law saying which country processes an asylum claim, usually the first one entered it, puts this disproportionate strain on frontline countries. Italy, Greece.
Because most people arrive there first by sea or land.
Exactly. And this, unfortunately, can fuel support for anti-immigrant parties in those countries because they feel overwhelmed, unfairly burdened. EU parliamentarian Tineke Strick was pretty blunt. She concluded, Dublin should be abolished. Said it's unfair and ineffective.
So if Dublin isn't working, what's the alternative? What would a fairer system look like, and what would the benefits be?
Well, a more equitable redistribution of asylum seekers across Europe would mean faster, fairer procedures because resources wouldn't be overwhelmed in just a few places.
Okay, efficiency and fairness.
But more profoundly, Amanda Bysong and David Gunn suggested allowing migrants some say in where they claim asylum.
Letting them choose.
Within reason, perhaps. Maybe based on family ties, community connections, language skills. They argue this would actually facilitate cooperation, enhance trust in the system, and ease integration processes tremendously.
That makes intuitive sense. Going somewhere you have connections versus somewhere random.
Imagine the difference. It would be more humane, more efficient, and likely lead to more successful integration for everyone.
Okay, this raises that crucial question again. If there are so many good ideas out there, the Canadian system, ways to fix asylum, skills partnerships, why aren't they being widely implemented? It feels like we talk about solutions but don't always do them.
It's a powerful and, somewhat frustrating point echoed by many experts. Bram Frau's offered a surprisingly hopeful angle, though. He argued maybe a total overhaul of EU policy isn't even needed. He believes we just need to start implementing what is already there.
Meaning the frameworks exist.
Yes. Sensible existing frameworks, treaties, guidelines, policy documents like the UN's Global Compact for Migration, which aims to save lives, foster orderly movement. The problem isn't a lack of good ideas, he argues, it's a lack of action, a lack of political will to execute them. He pointed out the tragic irony of having documents aiming to save lives while people are drowning daily in the Mediterranean.
Oh, it's not a creativity deficit, it's a commitment deficit.
That's a great way to put it, precisely. Arjun Hainkamp from Doctors Without Borders highlighted the UN's existing UNHCR system. It allows asylum seekers to start applications outside the EU, offers a safe, legal pathway, avoids dangerous journeys.
That sounds sensible.
It is. It's a good system. But European states simply need to commit greater numbers to it, take more people through that structured pathway. Camilla Wismer-Hagen from the Danish Refugee Council echoed this. Solidarity mechanisms exist within the EU to redistribute asylum seekers, but requests from Italy and Greece, often not accepted by other member states.
So the tools are there, but they're not being used effectively.
The political commitment is often missing. Exactly.
This really feels like the core tension. Policymakers say they want control over borders. Understandable, but what does that actually mean? Is it just about restriction? These two seem conflated.
Katharina Natter, a doctoral researcher, makes a crucial distinction here. The heated debate, often driven by this feeling of loss of control.
Yeah, you hear that phrase a lot.
But the main political response has been more restriction. Build fences, tighten borders, make legal paths harder. Paradoxically, she argues, this leads to more irregular movements as people find other, often dangerous ways.
Because they have no other option.
Right. And these irregular movements then increase the very feeling of lost control. She calls it a vicious cycle.
Wow. So restricting more makes things feel less controlled.
Exactly. The more you restrict without offering viable legal alternatives, the more people are forced into irregular routes, making the whole system feel more chaotic, less controlled.
So true control isn't about shutting borders down completely.
Right.
It's about managing movement effectively within clear legal frameworks, making it predictable.
Precisely. An alternative policy moves away from equating control just with restriction. Instead, it aims for a situation where control means the vast majority migrate within legal, predictable frameworks. That offers predictability for everyone. Migrants know the rules, host countries can plan. It fosters order and trust, not the chaos and desperation we often see with extreme restriction.
Yeah.
It's about designing a system that works with mobility, not just against it.
This deep dive keeps showing us the conversation can't just be about receiving countries.
No, definitely not.
The role of sending countries where people are leaving from is critical, but their views often seem overlooked.
Hugely overlooked. Martine Pluim points out Europe's focus on restriction and returning migrants often poisons relationships with origin countries, hinders cooperation on other vital things. Raphael Shelehav noted that pressure from Western capitals to do more on migration isn't always based on real needs or dialogue with these countries. It can disrupt existing partnerships.
So it's counterproductive sometimes.
It can be. And Emraz Khan, who is a migrant herself, argues powerfully. Until migrant-sending countries themselves lead the discussion, truly humane and effective policies aren't really possible. And this matters because, as Tineke-Strick noted, remittances, the money migrants sent home, are essential. Hundreds of billions of dollars annually.
More than 80 said earlier.
Far more. So origin countries have a massive financial and developmental interest in regular, well-managed migration. There's a shared incentive for cooperation there if we approach it right.
Okay, and what about the local level, below national politics? Cities, towns, where people actually arrive and live. Is the dynamic different there?
Yes, fascinatingly different. Bram Frauth highlights this contrast. National or European debates, often heated, polarized, stuck. But at the city or town level, you see something else entirely, much more pragmatic.
Why is that?
Because cities deal directly with the realities. The reception of asylum seekers, access to services for undocumented migrants, it's hands-on. Less ideological, more practical problem solving.
Makes sense. They have to make it work on the ground.
Exactly. Giving cities a stronger voice could add a vital dimension to policy. More flexible, effective solutions based on real needs. Başak Afkan's research in Istanbul showed how direct participation, partnerships at the municipal level, led to much higher levels of refugee integration, better than national averages.
Because they're closer to the situation.
Closer, more agile, less constrained by national political rhetoric often. It shows the power of local action.
Okay, we've covered so much ground. Drivers, myths, solutions, challenges, but the sources seem to suggest an even bigger shift might be needed, a fundamental reframing of the whole narrative.
This is where it gets really interesting, yeah. Maybe the overarching takeaway is perhaps we shouldn't even be talking about migration policy as this separate, isolated thing.
Why not? How else should we talk about it?
Because that approach, focusing on migration policy, can, ironically, contribute to what one expert called an exceptionalist discourse. It makes migration seem like this abnormal issue, this problem to be solved or contained, rather than just a normal, ongoing part of human society.
Right. We talked about migration being as old as humanity.
Exactly.
So if not migration policy, then what?
Well, first, really hammer home the positive side we touched on. Migration as a major driver of development and prosperity.
The economic engine aspect?
Absolutely. The World Economic Forum emphasizes. For centuries, migration has been a major driver of development and prosperity. And think about those remittances again. $670 billion annually to low and middle income countries.
More than foreign investment, more than aid.
Way more. It's a colossal economic engine. Fostering growth, supporting families, building economies. That fact alone should shift how we see the value of mobility.
Okay, so emphasize the benefits. What else?
Katharina Natter proposed this fascinating idea. What if, instead of focusing narrowly on migration policy, we talked about things like healthcare, labor market, education, aging populations, and then looked at migration through the lens of those topics.
So how migration impacts healthcare needs, or fills labor gaps, or affects schools.
Precisely. She argues constantly talking about migration policy separately reinforces that exceptionalist view. But if we discuss migration in terms of these broader societal needs and benefits, like addressing labor shortages, enriching cultural diversity, bringing innovation, it becomes more relatable, more normal. And Lauren Landau agreed. This approach has a better chance of progressive change. It reframes migration as a solution, or at least a component, within existing societal challenges, not just a challenge in itself.
That's a really smart reframing, integrated into normal policy discussions.
Exactly.
Which brings us back to the core challenge, building the political will, the public support for these more humane, effective approaches. It all comes down to the story we tell, right?
Absolutely. And Victoria S. is drawing on that Canadian success story, really emphasizes asking policymakers and the public, why do we need immigrants? And then clearly highlighting the tangible benefits. She says this open, benefit-focused approach paid off in Canada. Canadians generally support their policy.
And that support leads to better integration.
Yes. Immigrants are more likely to integrate successfully, and both they and Canada benefit. It's that positive feedback loop again. Transparency, clear benefits, public confidence, better outcomes.
And this is where that idea of a new migration alliance comes in, bringing different groups together.
Precisely. Lauren Landau suggests people from the pro-trade right, who value economic growth and efficiency, and the humanist left, who prioritize rights and compassion, they must craft a narrative that reframes current policymaking.
Finding common ground.
Yes, finding a way to argue convincingly to fellow citizens everywhere that migration is not inimical but intrinsic to society's health and well-being. This kind of alliance built on shared understanding, focused on predictability, focused on benefits like Canada's comprehensive ranking system provides, that's what can calm the debate and build public trust.
It makes so much sense. Finding that shared narrative, the Invisible Nation source summed it up powerfully, saying, we need to see newcomers not as a burden, but as future doctors, entrepreneurs, and neighbors. Then everyone benefits. The story of those 123 million displaced people globally, it's not happening somewhere else. It is happening here. It touches us all. And maybe the most meaningful response sometimes is just that simple individual act of welcome, like Brazil's Operação, the Acolhida operation welcome, offering a path to a new beginning for Venezuelans. It brings it down to a human scale.
That human connection is vital.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it's so clear. Migration is profound, complex, multifaceted, but it holds this immense, often untapped potential for human development, for global prosperity. It's a conversation that really touches all of us, directly or indirectly. Needs our thoughtful attention.
Absolutely. From understanding those diverse drivers,
Yep.
economic opportunity, education, fleeing conflict and persecution, climate change, to debunking the myths about poverty or jobs,
Yeah.
and exploring successful models like Canada's transparent and comprehensive ranking system, or those local welcome initiatives like in Brazil, the picture gets much clearer, doesn't it?
It does.
The facts so often contradict the fears.
And we've seen how that fundamental shift in perspective, moving from just restriction to focusing on well-managed, predictable pathways, integrating migration into broader discussions, how that can unlock huge benefits for individuals, communities, nations. It's about genuine control through order and transparency, not just exclusion.
Remember those key terms we flagged at the start. Migration, refugee, asylum, diaspora, catalyst, comprehensive ranking system, persecution, displacement, labor shortage, predictability. We hope understanding these terms and the discussions around them empowers you to engage more confidently, more accurately in your own conversations about this vital topic. Knowledge, when it's understood and applied thoughtfully, it's really valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you've enjoyed this deep dive, if you want more insights like this, please do subscribe to the deep dive wherever you get your listening material. We love digging into these complex topics.
And as you reflect on everything we've discussed today, especially maybe the stories of those 123 million people in the invisible nation, people on the move, seeking safety, opportunity, building new lives, here's a final thought for you to maybe mull over. In a world where so many are seeking new beginnings, redefining their place, what does the concept of home truly mean to you?
That's a deep one to end on. Thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery. We hope it's given you plenty to think about. Until next time.